8 Coronation Street spoilers for next week 16th to 20th June. Next week on Coronation Street. Lisa places Brody in danger. Debbie comes smooth approximately her devastating diagnosis. Lou reels Gary in. And is Theo gambling away? 1. Lisa makes a probably deadly mistake. Brody reveals himself returned with inside the custody suite Weatherfield police station another time subsequent week. However, his cockiness may want to become having dire consequences. Seeing his antique STC train Daniel operating at one of the tables with inside the cafe, Brody cannot withstand winding him up. But as Brody's mood starts to flare, he intentionally knocks over a drink over Daniel's pile of paperwork. Witnessing the incident, Lisa threatens to arrest Brody for harassment. However, this seemingly does not anything to position him off. As Carla then walks in, she's amazed to discover Lisa with inside the technique of cuffing Brody, who right away marches him right all the way down to the station. Turning out his wallet earlier than taking into custody, Brody pulls out a few white pills. Lisa needs to recognize what they are. However, he refuses to reply her questions as she confiscates them. Later, Brody is yelling out from his mobilular as an officer summons Lisa. Brody tells her that he desires his meds. However, given Brody by no means informed the custody officer what they have been, she's doubtful of his claims. As Brody turns into an increasing number of desperate, Lisa walks away and fails to listen him factor out that he has epilepsy. It becomes simplest remaining week that Brody suffered a healthy out-of-doors the Rovers, with Kit and Bernie, who Brody would not recognize, are his organic father and grandmother respectively, coming to his aid. Moments after Lisa leaves, Brody collapses onto the ground of his mobilular as he suffers any other epileptic healthy. 2. Lou drives a wedge among Gary and Maria. The feud among Maria and Lou reached a dramatic new degree remaining week, with Maria dealing with crook charges, having wangled herself an invite to the barbecue on the Platt House. Maria's suspicions have been raised whilst she noticed Lou duck interior. Lou knew for a reality there has been a huge wad of coins interior Shona's bag geared up to take to the bank. However, as she determined towards stealing it and located it returned interior Shona's bag, Maria got here in and stuck her. In the following argument, Lou ended up falling onto David's cutting-edge glass-crowned espresso table. His delight and pleasure of the refurb, shattering it to smithereens, though what is not clean is whether or not Lou fell as Maria claimed, or whether or not she become pushed. Already miffed that husband Gary were sympathizing and performing as a confidant for Lou, she become in addition pissed off whilst he supplied to take Lou to the clinic to have her cuts visible too. Maria become greatly surprised whilst she become later approached with the aid of using officials with inside the Rovers, who knowledgeable her they have been arresting her on suspicion of ABH. Next week, Maria returns domestic telling Gary she has been launched pending in addition investigation. She's briefed to lash out at Lou whilst she later comes throughout her with inside the salon. Satisfied she become the only who stated her, however Lou flatly denies it. So who did tip off the police? But for Gary, the point of interest is someplace else because the cracks in his marriage start to widen. Later, whilst Lou turns up on the flat and insists she would not need any problem, Gary responds with a quiet kindness, providing her a beer. On the surface, it appears harmless sufficient, however is Lou gambling in extended recreation to get returned at Maria with the aid of using winding Gary in. And that problem may not be a long way off. The accept as true with among Gary and Maria is already on skinny ice. And if Gary maintains searching at Lou via rose-tinted glasses, it would shatter completely. 3. Will Sally and Tim air their worries? Meanwhile, having been searching after Lou's younger daughters Joni and Shanice, Sally has a few worries and shows to Tim that they need to possibly touch social services. With their dad Mick now locked up for the demise of Craig, Lou has been suffering to make ends meet and admitted to son Brody that touchdown the women at the Metcalf's doorstep did as a minimum suggest they have been getting a right feed. But the women, response to listening to Sally and Tim having a minor disagreement, petrified that matters have been approximately to get violent. gave Sally and Tim a glimpse into what existence were like for them inside the Michaelis house. Will Tim conform to percentage their worries with the government and probably make matters worse for Lou? On the plus side, after her preliminary reservations, searching after the women has simplest reinforced Sally's perception that they are doing the proper aspect with the aid of making use of to turn out to be foster parents. 4. Is Theo gambling away? Over at number 11, the connection woes among Todd and Theo preserved to linger and not using a result in sight. Theo's teenage daughter Millie dropped a bombshell remaining week with the aid of revealing she become pregnant, prompting Theo to transport returned in together along with his own circle of relatives to help her. When Theo ultimately published an image of the own circle of relatives collectively once more on his socials, Todd become left feeling at the outer. Determined to numb the sting, Todd heads to drown his sorrows with Billy and Sean inside the Rovers. Todd comes to a decision to half-place a shot returned at Theo with the aid of snapping a selfie of the three of them and posting it onto his personal socials. It's now no longer lengthy earlier than Sean's flicking via his relationship app and up pops a surprise profile for Theo. Is Theo surely gambling away? Or is a person stirring trouble? As tensions rise, Theo later manages to speak Todd down and begins off evolved setting the portions together. A person's out to cut them up. But who? 5. Todd makes a large mistake. Later inside the week, Glenda and Sean equipment up with Leaflet losing for a drag night on the Rovers. Todd ropes Theo into going, hoping for a piece of mild remedy. However, Theo's distracted, nevertheless glued to Millie's steady texts. Todd attempts to mask his frustration as he desires Theo might stay a little. As the nighttime is going on, Sean casually slip to a stunned Theo that Todd and Billy have been as soon as an object lower back inside the day. Later, recognizing Theo's telecell smartphone unattended, Todd cheekily flicks it onto plane mode to present Theo a ruin from the barrage of texts. When Theo assumes Millie's misplaced interest, he relaxes, bonds with Billy, or even swaps numbers with him. But the temper is shattered while Theo discovers the fact his telecell smartphone's been offline. And Danielle's been desperately looking to attain him as Millie's in hospital. As Theo storms out, will he ever be capable of forgive Todd? By Friday, the fallout is a long way from over. Todd unearths Theo sat inside the residing room at number 11, time and again snapping an elastic band on his wrist to quiet signal that matters aren't okay. Millie's suffering too, confiding that residing together along with her mom is sending her over the edge. When Theo indicates she live with them longer, all eyes flip to Todd. Is he inclined to play satisfied households for a piece longer? But Millie's finished waiting. She later tells Todd in no unsure phrases that she needs her dad home. She needs normality, and she'll do something it takes to make that happen. The query is, simply how a long way is Millie inclined to go? 6. Debbie exhibits her devastating mystery to her own circle of relatives. Elsewhere, Debbie's slightly preserving it collectively as she maintains her mystery war in opposition to young-onset dementia. Unable to stand being round Ronnie having dumped him following her prognosis, Debbie vents to Bernie, who indicates some quiet liquids at Debbie's resort may assist take the threshold off. But as they come on the Chariot Square bar, they clock 16-year antique Brody taking part in a drink with a mate. Best he cannot produce any ID whilst challenged via way of means of Debbie. Debbie's already on a quick fuse, and this hints her over. In a flash of anger, she grabs his bottle and smashes it at the bar, surprising Bernie. On Friday, visitors gets a sense of the disorientation that Debbie is facing, as visible through her eyes. Bernie maintains distress for her pal as Debbie forgets to pay on the cafe, and matters best snowball from there. When Debbie tells Ronnie and Leanne that a deliberate awards nighttime on the resort will need to be cancelled, there has been a flood. Leanne steps in with a solution, providing Speed Doll as a backup venue. Although they have insisted they may be not anything extra than friends, Debbie remains suspicious over Ronnie and Leanne's friendship as she watches them guffawing collectively. But Debbie may be approximately to stumble onto something a long way extra scandalous. Debbie's more youthful brother Carl, the best one to be aware about her prognosis, continues to be decided to win over the affections of sister in regulation Abby. As he quietly talks to Abby, out of earshot of Kevin, Carl tells Abby that they may be intended to be collectively. They're greatly surprised after they all at once recognize that Debbie is proper subsequent to them, looking them intently, but all is not because it appears, whilst Debbie all at once passes out. When she comes round, Kevin and Abby insist she wishes sorting out at hospital. However, as she struggles to argue in opposition to them, she's left with best one option. Debbie tells them that there is not a whole lot factor, as she already is aware of what is incorrect. Together along with her she has dementia. How will Kevin and Abby react to Debbie's devastating news? 7. James confronts Dee. Over on the Bailey household, Dee faces in addition own circle of relatives anxiety subsequent week, after a heartfelt second with toddler daughter Layla. Having deliberate to have Layla, the daughter of her late, abusive ex Joel, followed out, Dee sooner or later agreed handy her over to brother James and his accomplice Danny, who have been dwelling with inside the U.S. Things were given even more difficult whilst Dee needed to go through an emergency hysterectomy following Lila's birth, which means Layla will be the best toddler she ought to ever have naturally. However, she insisted that James take Layla regardless. But now that James is all at once dwelling lower back at domestic after splitting with Danny, and with Layla extra found in Dee's life, she's locating it more difficult than ever to hold her distance. When James admits to Dee that Layla stored him wakeful maximum of the night time, she gives to take over and supply him a break. Whilst being concerned for her daughter, Dee cannot assist, however smile at her. Daniel later indicates to Dee that she ought to chat with Amy, approximately doing a scholar radio characteristic on black women's reports with maternity, something that could assist Dee technique the whole thing that happened. Later with inside the week, Dee receives a letter announcing Lila's vaccinations are due. However, whilst Michael tells her James is away in Leeds, she realizes she'll need to deal with it herself. The go-to is extra emotional than she expected, and she or he confides in Michael approximately how hard it was. Later, Dee admits to Daniel that she's now no longer certain she's sturdy sufficient for the radio interview. However, Daniel does his first class to persuade her to move for it. On Friday, Dee and James locate themselves butting heads over Layla, it turning into clean to James that she's suffering with having her daughter so near again. Will Dee admit that it is stirring up extra than she bargained for? 8. Audie pushes the boat out. Also subsequent week, whilst Bernie overhears Audie speaking approximately a few spectacularly stupid stuff with Amy and Summer with inside the cafe, she tells him that he is middle elderly earlier than his time. Bernie encourages Audie to exit and stay in touch while he nevertheless has the chance. Prompted via way of means of Bernie's suggestion, Audie later rounds up Amy and Summer with plans to organize a party. What ought to probable pass incorrect? Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more movie spoilers next week. Goodbye and see you again.